Welcome in to the Shank and Spence show today. It happens to be a Thursday afternoon, and I got a very special guest here to my left. It's Steve Shoemaker, aka Intern Steve, but he's also a good friend of the program, good friend of the show, and I wanted to welcome him in today. What's going on, Steve?
It's very nice to be here, Spence. Thanks for having me on.
And it's great to have you on as well. We're going to be talking about some NBA playoff basketball today on the docket. And, Steve, my first question to you, man, is last night's Celtics-Warriors game. I mean, you happened to watch that matchup last night. And really, what did you think of that entire matchup last night?
Spence, it was a really good game. And in the beginning, the Celtics were up on them. I think at one point they were up by 16. So definitely for Cavs fans, it was definitely nerve-wracking. But the Cavs, with their big three, they fought back, and sure enough, they ended up winning the game.
When you watch that game, Steve, the Celtics definitely got up, as you were saying, but it just seems like they didn't have that option to go to in the fourth quarter. Do you think that Marcus Smart should have played better last night? Do you think Crowder should have played better, or do you think that they were just pretty much in the first half just kind of getting lucky in terms of how their offense was flowing? Because you're watching the highlights here, and you kind of see the Celtics were kind of dictating play, and Al Horford was having himself a big game, Big Al. Do you think that they just kind of came back down to earth in the second half?
Yeah, definitely. I think also with their all-star guard, Isaiah Thomas, being out, there's no really key guy to go to for scoring, so they're just going to have to share the ball and anyone with an open shot, and hopefully they make it. And that's what they were doing in the first half. But, guys like Marcus Smart, he had a big game in Game 3, and then, came back to reality in Game 4. He wasn't doing a whole lot. Guys like Crowder and Bradley, you need them to have big games to beat a big team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we're gonna see. It's gonna be very interesting in Game 5 to see who is that key guy that the Celtics go to for points.
Absolutely here, and we're previewing here the NBA Finals preview. I know that it's a little sacrilegious to count out the Boston Celtics, but what do you think that the series is over, Steven?
Going back home where the Celtics lost their first two games at home, it is in the favor of the Cavaliers, just knowing the past couple of games, how they've played, and even Game 3, it was a very close game. Came down to the final shot. You don't want to count the Boston Celtics out at all, especially when they're home. But, up against a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, there's just too much that they have to offer. I don't really see how the Celtics could win. You never know, but I truly believe the Cavaliers are going to send them packing, and they're going to move on for the straight championship.
I mean, Steven, when you really look here at these playoffs, has it been embarrassing for the NBA, the lack of parity, the lack of just, sheer competition? And when you were growing up, you had the Kobe Bryant years. You had Dwight Howard with the Magic being able to win the conference a couple times. When you had Dwight Howard, and it just seemed like the Eastern Conference was more stacked. Paul Pierce in his prime. What do you think now about the competition in the Eastern Conference? You have the Raptors. You have teams like. The Pacers are a shell of what they used to be. Do you think that just the East is so down this year? And just talk about really your, as a fan, watching these playoffs, has it really been a disappointment, the NBA playoffs?
Yeah, I think, Spence, it's a great question. There's definitely been some disappointment there. I watched the interview with Kevin Durant the other day and how he was saying, the fans are always complaining about how there's these blowouts with the Cavaliers and with the Warriors, and he's saying, tough luck, it is what it is. And to a certain extent, Kevin Durant had a point, but I do believe that fans, a fan like myself, it's very disappointing just to see these blowout games. You love to see close games like the Cavaliers and Celtics game in Game 3. You love to see a down-to-the-wire shot, even a buzzer beater. So you definitely want to see more games like that. But in terms of just how the conferences ended up, the West, I think, there's always one or two dominant teams the past couple of years with the Warriors and the Spurs, and I think there are more teams that are coming up, like the Timberwolves. They're eventually in a couple of years or two. They're going to be a good dominant team. And in terms of the Eastern Conference, it's really just the Cavaliers. Like, there's no one that's really giving them much competition. And I truly believe until LeBron James does end up retiring, he's always going to be the dominant team, whatever team he's on. Most likely, he'll be with the Cavaliers for the remainder of his career. But
do you think that LeBron James planned to go back to Cleveland? Because I really think when he was in Miami, like he had this in the back of his mind. And I mean, I don't know if the NBA, I don't know if they would get in the rigging the lottery. If you remember the year where they got Kyrie Irving, they had to jump like maybe 9 spots. And it's just pretty unbelievable that the Cavs ended up getting, Kyrie Irving. He ends up coming back to Cleveland. I mean, for you, did that make you more of a LeBron fan when that happened at the time? Him coming back to Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really big move on his part to come back to Cleveland. And like how he went from one big three with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh to another big three and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. It was just awesome to see how like he surrounds himself with such great all-star caliber players. And as it shows, he's going to his 7th straight championship, and he's just going to continue to progress, especially with the players around him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that LeBron James has definitely made J.R. Smith more successful. I think Shumpert, but you look at this team, you look at Tyronn Lue, they've really made this basketball team. This is an underrated team just in terms of the talent of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like Kevin Love's kind of playing at a high level right now, and I just I enjoy watching Cleveland. I enjoy watching Cleveland play the game, Steven, because, they just have guys that are just underrated shooters that can just kind of space the floor like J.R. Smith. And these are talented offensive players. Even Iman Shumpert's a talent as well. And I think that really Cleveland has set themselves up where, I guess without LeBron James, how good would the Cavaliers be? Do you think that they'd still win the conference with Kyrie Irving? Because you saw last night Kyrie take over. Do you think that Cleveland can win the East without LeBron, if that were a hypothetical?
Truthfully, I'd have to say no to that. I don't think so. Like, it kind of takes you back even it's like both ways. Like, it takes you back to 2 years ago when they played the Warriors in the finals, and he lost Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, and he was unable to defeat them by himself. But then again, if the roles were reversed and it was Kyrie and Kevin without LeBron, I still don't think they would be able to beat a tough team like the Golden State Warriors.
You talk to a lot of people around town. You have a lot of friends who like basketball, and a lot of people are rooting for LeBron James to, in fact, lose. And I actually happen to be one of those people, because we're all sports fans. And, when I say, like, I don't like the Cavaliers and I want the Cavs to lose, it's because I'd rather see somebody come out of the East like the Boston Celtics. And then usually people's defense to you rooting against LeBron is, well, LeBron's never done anything wrong in his life. Like, why are you rooting for the guy to fail? But you seem to be a LeBron fan. But why do you think why do you think people out there dislike LeBron James? Why do you think that is?
I'm not really sure, Spence. I know, like, there are a lot of players who have a problem with LeBron, such as, like, how he plays on the court. A lot of the time when he gets fouled, or if he doesn't get fouled, you always see him complaining to the refs. And I think a lot of people are like, he's such like a crybaby. He gets whatever he wants because he's LeBron James. But to a certain extent, I have always been a fan of his just to see what he's capable of doing and some of the scenarios he's been put in. And you look at the guy, and he's going to his 8th championship, looking for his 4th ring, and it's hard to not like someone who has that type of caliber.
Yeah, just keep on the mic there, buddy. And yeah, when you look at when you look at this rematch, I mean, this is going to be pretty exciting. LeBron playing the Golden State Warriors, and this Golden State team. It is really impressive. I think they're one of the greatest teams of all time because I think that their defense this year is more elite, Steven. And I think that Draymond Green, I think he just does so much for Golden State on the floor. I think he's even sometimes more valuable than a Klay Thompson. Like, what do you think about Draymond Green? And do you think that Draymond Green, you think he's a Hall of Famer? Like, how talented do you think Draymond is? And like, a lot of people out there just think Draymond Green is just a guy who hustles and a guy that is at sometimes dirty and kicks people in the groin. But when you actually watch Draymond play, what do you think of Draymond Green?
Me personally, I'm not a big Draymond Green fan. Like you said it yourself, he can be a very dirty player. I think he's definitely a great player, especially with the players that surround him. They make him a better player. He's definitely a top player. I watched him at Michigan State. He was a good player, a very solid player, and he brought that over to the NBA as well. But I just don't think he has enough to bring to the table to make him a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, well, but when you look at Draymond, though, Steven, I mean, this is a guy that can dribble the basketball. He can dribble, he can finish. He plays almost like a guard, even though he's 6'8", and he can also defend the rim. So he's so versatile, though. When you look at Draymond, I mean, he's an unbelievable rebounder, and a lot of times people like you will say, "Well, Draymond's dirty," but then other people will just say he's just competitive. So I don't know. It's such a fine line, isn't it, between dirty and competitive?
Yeah, there's a fine line there, but then again, you could see someone like LeBron James, for example. He's just as competitive as Draymond Green is, but you don't see him kicking people in the groin or flopping like he was doing the other night,
Yeah, like against Steven Adams, right? Exactly. So you were against the whole Kevin Durant going to Golden State. Like, you think it's ruined the Western Conference. You think it's ruined basketball, right? The NBA.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying it ruins basketball, but definitely like there has been talks in the future of like these super teams and stuff. I remember at one point the Lakers, when they were in their prime with Kobe, and they were talking possibly about bringing Chris Paul over, and they're saying that wouldn't be fair, it'd be a super team. And then something like this happens, and Kevin Durant goes over to the best team in the Western Conference, probably the best team in the league, and it just shows you like, when you look at the preview for the finals, if the Cavs do make it there, it's basically the same matchup as it was last year, except the Warriors have added Kevin Durant to their team, which most people would say they're probably going to beat the Cavaliers pretty easily because they're the same team as they were last year, but with another great all-star on their roster.
Yeah, one that, happened to, almost beat, Golden State, last year with Westbrook. I mean, the thing is, I guess Kevin Durant's going to guard LeBron James in this series. I mean, and then Draymond. No, I think you're going to put Clay on Kyrie Irving, but Kevin Durant really adds that extra defender that they need. That's what because if LeBron James is able to go downhill in the paint, he's going to hold the ball. This series is going to be actually a half-court grinded-out series because even though Cleveland likes to get up and down, like that plays right into the Warriors' hands. They'll just bomb you out from three if you do that. So this is going to be a half-court series because in the half-court, I think that Cleveland has a much better chance, Steven, of winning this series because then, Stephen Curry is kind of neutralized. Like you saw last year in the finals how Steph Curry was unable to even get past Kevin Love in a one-on-one situation in a half-court setting. So I guess LeBron's going to be holding the ball till late in the shot clock, and then it's going to be Kyrie and LeBron creating. Is that how you kind of see Cleveland getting at this series that way?
Yeah, definitely. And just like, they have a lot more what they have to do with their defense in terms of stopping Kevin Durant, stopping Steph Curry, stopping Klay Thompson. You could see like from the first the first three series that they've had, they've just dominated so easily. They took care of the Jazz very easily, and they're undefeated right now in the playoffs, and I don't see them losing anytime soon. But I think the Cavs, when they face the Cavs, most likely the Cavs are gonna be able to take care of them pretty quickly. But we'll see. I think it's gonna be a very good series, and I easily see it going to 7 games.
So for the NBA, do you think that it would have been bad for Boston to win this series? Because you would have had a great Eastern Conference final if Boston were able to win yesterday and then come back and win. It would show parity in the Eastern Conference, or are you just really looking forward to the finals?
I'm looking forward to the finals. I've had a couple talks with some of my friends, some bets here and there about there being the same championship with the Cavs and the Warriors. It would have been awesome, to see an upset, to see the Celtics take down the Cavaliers. I don't see that happening, but if that happened, that'd be awesome. But I truly believe the Cavaliers have more on their team to be able to beat a team such as the Warriors.
You know what's interesting though is that I look at I look at San Antonio with Kawhi Leonard. They're up 23. Kawhi Leonard is the best two-way player in basketball. He's a top 3 player in the game. I think that series could have won at least 6 games because you're assuming that, San Antonio wins back home floor if Kawhi is healthy. And then, Kawhi Leonard, he can D up guys like Durant and like Steph Curry. So then I thought that series would have been very compelling because it looked like the Spurs just played unbelievable defense. And then Tony Parker was also hurt. So is it fair to say that if Kawhi Leonard wasn't hurt, that would have been a great, great series?
Yeah, Spence, I agree. I don't know if I'd say Kawhi Leonard is a top 3 player in the league. He's definitely top 5, definitely up there.
Okay.
That's an argument for another time. But
Yeah.
I do agree it would have been a much closer series. Very easily could have gone to 7 games if you had Kawhi Leonard in there, if you had Tony Parker in there. And obviously you saw without them, the Warriors had their way with them. And anytime you take out a team's best player, it's very hard to compete with that, that all-star player that surrounds their team and makes their teammates better. So, yeah, I think it could have very easily been a different series. It could have possibly even to a certain extent ended up being the Spurs versus the Celtics in the finals. You never know.
Really?
If Isaiah didn't go down, if Kawhi didn't go down, but
I think that ironically, and this is going to be kind of an unpopular opinion, but I think the Celtics against the Cleveland Cavaliers, I think they're better off without Isaiah Thomas, just from a defensive standpoint, because Isaiah Thomas is 5'7", and when he's out there on the floor, he's just such a defensive liability that, you have to, compensate for Isaiah Thomas's guy, and Isaiah Thomas would then have to guard maybe, I don't know if he would guard Kyrie Irving, but even if Shumpert is on Isaiah, Isaiah's just going to get ISO'd, and then he could, you could post up versus a 5'7" guy. You can do pretty much anything versus a guy that height. And I think going forward that it's actually advantageous for Boston to deal Isaiah Thomas and get back picks. Because even though Isaiah Thomas is a talented offensive player, you're just not going to win with him, him being on the floor as your star player at 5'7", you know what I mean? And also I think that you're looking at Jonas Jerebko. You're looking at guys like Crowder and Marcus Smart. Since Isaiah Thomas has the ball in his hands a lot less, they're actually performing at a higher, caliber because Isaiah Thomas is not dominating the basketball. Now, Isaiah Thomas is certainly a talent. He certainly took over games. He was an incredible story. But just in terms of winning a title, I think Boston would be much better suited with just Markelle Fultz and then maybe moving Isaiah Thomas and letting him, score maybe 25 a game on another basketball team and getting back more picks. I mean, would you be opposed to trading Isaiah Thomas, and how much do you value him?
I personally wouldn't be opposed to getting rid of Isaiah Thomas. There's definitely a lot of good you could get from him. I don't see the Celtics getting rid of their all-star point guard. I just don't see something like that happening, especially you see how close they're getting to being a championship team. And if Isaiah stays healthy next year, and if they do indeed get Markelle Fultz, you could just see how dangerous of a team they could be.
I'd argue, though, that Isaiah Thomas, just defensively, I don't think that they're close to beating Cleveland. Even though in Game 3, LeBron had maybe his worst game of his playoff career, the Celtics needed very fortunate bounces. They needed Marcus Smart to go off, and they needed, incredible shooting from Jerebko and Marcus Smart in that second half when the Cavs were sleepwalking. Even yesterday, LeBron played an awful first half, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, they still handled them pretty easily, with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. They even almost covered the 15-point spread. So I'd argue that this series will probably be over in 5 games, at 6 at most. And if the Cavs really wanted to, if they paid full attention to Game 5, they'll probably get the win. I don't think Boston is all that close to beating the Cleveland Cavaliers, even if you put Markelle and Isaiah Thomas on a team. I think you need Markelle Fultz, and then I think you need maybe like a Paul George or a Jimmy Butler to be able to beat LeBron James.
Absolutely.
That's who I think you need, to beat him. He's just that dominant.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the East, like we were talking about before, how it's always going to be a very weak conference with the teams because, the Raptors were getting there, but now they're getting rid of Kyle Lowry, who we can talk about him in a second.
Yeah.
And then the Wizards are always going to be a competitive team. But, there's no one in the Eastern Conference that is really going to come close to, taking down the Cavs. But I think the Celtics, honestly, in the next couple of years have the best shot at doing that. And, we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, the Celtics are going to draft Fultz, and he's a combo guard. I think he could play the one. He could pull up and shoot. This is a guy who could probably average 19 points. He doesn't have unbelievable athleticism, but he kind of reminds me of like a C.J. McCollum type of player. So you put like a McCollum on the Celtics, it's certainly going to help. Jaylen Brown then needs to progress. He was the third overall pick last year, and Jaylen Brown, of life. But then the Celtics too, inside, you have Al Horford, who's kind of a soft big guy. The Celtics need a rim protector as well, but Al Horford, he's experienced. He's played really well actually in this conference final. He's a big time player. Avery Bradley, as alluded to. So the Celtics are clearly the second best team in the conference, even though Washington took them to 7. I mean, Washington, they didn't get close to winning a game at the Boston Garden where John Wall needed to hit a miraculous 3 just to get that game to 7 games, just to get that series to 7. So I look at Boston also, and they're just going to need to draft really well. And I see maybe 2 more years. When you look at Cleveland, Steven, I see about 2 more years where Cleveland can win the conference. And then I think when LeBron's 34, 35, I like actually the Boston Celtics because of the Brooklyn picks. I think they still might have another Brooklyn pick. They robbed them so bad. Yeah. And then you look at the Milwaukee Bucks and the Greek Freak, Jabari Parker, if he's healthy, Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, Milwaukee seems like that team as well. But my question is, basically in a roundabout way, is how long do you see Cleveland dominating this conference? How much longer?
I touched on it a little bit earlier, and I think Cleveland is going to continue to dominate, honestly, until LeBron either has some type of injury or considers retirement. LeBron is just so good of a player, surrounded by Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. I don't see them really going down at all, and LeBron is playing some of his best basketball of his career, and he's just going to keep continuing to progress. And I don't know how many more years he has in him, but if we pick a number, if you say he has 5 more years or more than that left in him, they're going to continue to be a dominant team. And I don't really know. That's what I'm saying. Until the Celtics get more players, they start working with it and see what they can do. They're probably the best shot at taking down the Cavaliers.
My question also is when you look at LeBron James, he's a guy that's like 6'8". He's just a moose on the basketball court. He really is just such a powerful guy. And when you looked at LeBron when he was only like 19, I guess he just didn't fill into his body. It's just crazy that at 32 years old, just the guy just doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. And do you think like does it ever pop in your mind like could this guy be using steroids because he's just that talented of a guy? I mean, do you ever think about that, honestly?
No, not anything to do with thinking about LeBron in a positive or negative way, but I'm sure he has, there are players that have been tested and whatnot, but I don't think you can even question his abilities. He's just that good of a player. It's all his hard work he's put in over the years, and he's in question with being one of the greatest players. And, you compare him to Michael Jordan. I was watching actually a segment this morning on SportsCenter on the dominance between LeBron James and Michael Jordan, who's the more dominant player and whatnot. And LeBron's actually 28 points away from tying Michael Jordan for most points all time in the playoffs, and he's most likely going to beat him pass him in game number 5.
Sure.
But I don't think that has never crossed my mind, him taking anything that has improved his game. I think he's worked hard, and he's proven that throughout the years.
Yeah, when you look at LeBron and Michael, a lot of Michael defenders will say, well, Michael didn't play he didn't play 7-game series, the first, opening games or maybe 5-game series. And but you just look at LeBron James, and the reason why he is so special is because he can handle the basketball, he can hold the ball, he controls the pace, he controls the tempo of the game as a point guard like Magic Johnson could do. And that's what really makes him special, I think, is his ball handling. Because you see some talented guys like Paul Pierce at, that forward position, but LeBron has really redefined what a point forward is, and that's what really makes him just incredibly special. But you look at LeBron, and he's just, again, like he's just physically just more imposing than everybody he plays against. And I think that gives, that's why a lot of fans, I think, like Steph Curry, because Steph Curry kind of reminds them of themselves,
right.
Where it's hard, to look at LeBron James and kind of compare, your basketball game to his. But, Steve, man, it's going to be a sensational final. The rematch game, the third series between the Warriors and the Cavs coming up, man. I am really excited. I'm sad that it's such a long layoff. The NBA playoffs in totality were kind of a failure. We could have gotten good Spurs Golden State series. You had Utah and the Clippers. Even the first round, you just saw a lot of blowouts, not a whole lot of drama and parity in the NBA, and that's something that needs to be addressed with the salary cap. And it's unfortunate because Adam Silver, a lot of people, Steven, were saying that Adam Silver should have intervened to Kevin Durant's decision, kind of like David Stern did with the super team that that Chris Paul was trying to go to Lakers with. But my answer to that is that these guys are free people and they're free to do what they want, and the commissioner shouldn't have that much power. So what do you think about that? Do you think the commissioner should have the right to veto super teams, or do you think that Kevin Durant had the right to kind of live life the way he wanted to?
Yeah, I think Kevin Durant definitely had the right to, go to the Warriors, but to a certain extent, I think the commissioner should be able to put his foot in the door and say, if this isn't going to be fair, it's gonna ruin the league. And as you've seen, the Warriors are such a great team, and if they stay as the same team they've been this year, they're going to continue to be a great team. Same thing goes for the Cavaliers, and I think to a certain extent, someone, most likely the commissioner, should be able to say, oh, my microphone out, should be able to say, this doesn't seem fair. This could impact the league. This could impact our viewers. So I think Adam Silver should be able to say, this player shouldn't go here because it might affect the league.
Absolutely. And Steve, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Shank and Spence, intern Steve, here for the summer. I'm sure this is not the last time you'll be seeing this young cat step into the studio. And it was a blast, man, and you killed it today. Opening day for Steve Shoemaker behind the mic, and hopefully the start of a very long and fruitful career in sports broadcasting. And guys, that'll do it for today's show. We'll probably be back tomorrow talking more NBA, talking NFL celebrations, OTAs, and everything more on Shank and Spence. Thank you, guys. Like our page if you like what you hear, and take care. Have a blessed